This is Rich Camback for the Infomax Network, and today we're talking to Dr. Philip Wainwright about port security. Okay, Phil, Cosmo Perrone, who's the director of security at the Port of Long Beach, describes their schematic design of security surveillance as a flow chart that goes like from domain awareness to risk vulnerability assessment, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And then it's all operating under an umbrella of security environment for the business continuity. However, he also claims that he lives in a constant state of paranoia because the security system in and of itself, the leveraging is still a complex event of processing data. And because of that, I'm curious to know on your end and what you've developed for smart ports, if you can expand on that and enlighten us as to what would be a much better, more efficient system.
I sure can. Ports, because there are historical locations, meaning that commerce at one point in time in a particular region focused on maritime. Still, globally, 85% of the world's cargo moves through a port at some point in time, at least internationally. So the ports have evolved over years and over time, and sometimes decades, sometimes centuries, and sometimes thousands of years, like we have in the Middle East and in China. So over the years, normally because of cost and perceived ideas of efficiency and what it takes to move goods from the land and rail and from the air onto the sea, where it's a cheaper form of transportation, they put together systems on the cheap. We have devised a global compliant operating system, which is based on the working papers that we analyzed back in 2002, which provided the Maritime Security Act and the Biosecurity Act, and we analyzed all the requirements that Congress decided in their wisdom that needed to be in place to protect the supply chain. Of course, our seaports are the major component of that. And so it was like reading the Da Vinci Code. It really was. There were several things that were necessary. Containerization and ability to track and trace containers are very key to the security of our supply chain and our ports. What the ports are facing is, because they've evolved over time and they've had different management and changes and ideas and philosophies, they have what's known as disparate, which means different systems that they've cobbled together and quilted together to try to create a safe and secure environment for which to move our supply chain. It just will not happen that way. There's too much. So here's how it should start to make a port smart. First of all, a group has to be named that has some expertise in this domain, which is port security. That expert group or management group needs to go third-party risk assessment group, and they're available. Lloyd's has some. Big major insurance companies need to come do a complete risk assessment associated with the port and its regional commerce, and decide where and when and how the function of that port work and what are its vulnerabilities. Based on that third-party assessment, and contemporaneously rather with that risk assessment, a security engineering firm with IT background needs to do an assessment of what systems are already in place, and that's called the legacy system. In 9 out of 10 ports, I only know of one port that's been built recently that has it. There are at least 15 to 25 different hardware and software systems that do not work together. And so to find any specific information, you have to go in and out of different softwares and in and out different computers and whatever. So there's no integration. What Global Compliant Operating System does is takes all those different operating systems, hardware, software, and otherwise, and marries them together. There is several firms that specialize in the marrying, if you will. It's called seamless migration of data and put it all in one place and Fortunately for the U.S., there the most of them in America and one's in the UK, and we have some groups also in Australia. But that's a very doable, and it's not a lot of money. It would cost less than $1 million to do a risk assessment of the physical aspect of the port, where the cargoes come in and how they go out, and how the movements within the port. While that's going on, then there needs to be a risk assessment about the legacy system, of why it's not been put together to work harmoniously. So that's how you begin the whole process. After you have those two components in place, and that will take 6 months, you need to do another very unique thing. You need to digitally photograph the port in its control zone. What is a digital photograph? That's an aerial photograph that uses a laser camera to take a picture of the control zone of the port. Most ports, 180 degrees of their exposure is on the sea. It really doesn't matter. You still need to run a digital aerial photograph through it, because those pixels that you have in a digital photograph can allow you to embed data in them, and that data can run from safety requirements as well as weather information, any number of things. There's up to 1,148 layers of information that can be embedded in a digital photograph. And armed with that information, then you begin to see and recognize and qualify with the project development group what the vulnerabilities of your port is, how long it's going to take to integrate your legacy system with the third step and the final step, which is digital aerial photograph, where you can layer all that information so that you can retrieve it. Remember that most of the systems work off what's known as a raster, which is a mapping system for digital mapping, and that's a longitude and latitude down to minutes and seconds. So you can come within really less than 1 meter or less than 3 feet in its accuracy. And in most instances, 99.9% of the time, that will give you the accuracy you need to do anything, whether it's moving container 1, 2, 3, 4 from point A to point B, or whether it's mitigating a fire that's on one of your wharfs or one of your docks, or it's moving an ambulance somewhere to get someone that's had a heart attack. All that's available. So the secret of having a GCOS system is being able to reconcile your risk with your IT, make them consistent, then digitally photograph the entire operation and put together in a map, a digital map in a system called the GCOS system. That's where you start making progress towards the end result, which is a safe and secure port.
This concludes part 1 of part 2 on port security with Dr. Philip Wainwright.